Have you ever thought about how a certain society's psychology can be defined by a thing that most of its members carry around in their pockets? Like in the time of the Wild Wild West, that thing was a gun. For the last several decades, it's been a credit card. Now, in the Old West, you were trained to know that you could get a bullet for any stupid reason, like cheating in poker, or insulting the wrong person, or not being fast enough to draw first. Now, we're trained to always get the pleasure of buying a thing now, and to defer the pain of actually paying for it to a later time. And since 83% of Americans use at least one credit card, we have to admit that this has become the norm. But is it actually in any way normal? In 2023, Americans' total credit card debt reached $925 billion. That means that every single American, including newborn babies, is on average over $3,000 in debt. All right, well, the baby is not actually in debt yet, but hey, give it a couple of weeks in the current economy. Though studies do suggest that when most people use credit cards, they're not much different from babies because they act based on instinct and reflexes rather than reason. Remember that experiment where a little kid would always choose one candy now instead of two candies later? Well, a study by MIT showed that the same people would spend 113% more on the same items when using credit cards than they would using cash. So the question is, when do we grow up? In this video, we'll speak about how credit cards make us pay more and what we can do about it. Now, what are the problems with credit card debt? What psychological traps make us spend more? And most importantly, what simple steps can we take to solve this problem? Let's get started. Well, first of all, who says that debt is all bad? I mean, now, credit card debt is certainly not a good thing, but in fact, the whole economic system has been based on getting now, paying later, since ancient times, and it's a thing natural to human existence. Like in Mesopotamia, thousands of years ago, farmers would borrow funds to grow crops and then pay them back with interest in a few months after the crops had been harvested and sold. Well, unless there was a drought, in which case the farmer would do another thing natural to human existence: grow a mustache and flee to Mexico. Anyway, credit and debt are inherent parts of healthy economic activity. They're needed to build companies and buy houses and so on. But here's the thing, there's good debt and bad debt. A debt which potentially increases your net worth, like a business loan, can be a good debt. Credit card debt is a prime example of bad debt. It is just money borrowed for consumption, something that won't increase in worth. If you have credit card debt, you are restricted in your economic activity. Plus, you usually pay a much higher interest than you would on a business loan or a mortgage. It's bad for you personally, and honestly, it's bad for a country's economy. So how come such a common and completely legitimate thing such as a credit card can come to be clearly misused so badly? Well, on the surface, there are clear guidelines on how to use it properly. Make purchases with your card like you would with cash. Pay off your debt on time so that your credit limit goes up and your credit score gets better, which gives you access to more financial instruments in the future as well as cool rewards. But how did it get so bad for so many people? Well, to answer that, let's do what all self-respecting millennials and Gen Zers do: go back in time and blame the boomers. The credit card boom started in the 1960s, shortly after Bank of America successfully launched the first credit card, Bank AmeriCard, in 1958. When banks realized how easy it was to charge the APR, annual interest percentage rate, which was up to 20% if people use loans for everyday purchases, well, they started literally sending credit cards by mail to random people. As Time magazine put it, to unemployable people, drunks, narcotics addicts, and compulsive debtors. Of course, the government soon realized that the banks were using people's nature against them. And by soon, I mean after about 100 million cards were already sent out. Anyway, in 1970, this practice was outlawed, and most states started setting a cap on credit card interest rates. It's like giving sugar to diabetics, said Betty Furness, an advisor to President Johnson regarding banks handing out credit cards and essentially luring people into psychological traps that they've set up. So what are these traps and how do they work? I mentioned the famous MIT experiment from 2001. Students were put in a bidding situation for tickets to a Boston Celtics game. Those paying with credit cards were ready to pay over $60 for the tickets, compared to a $28 average bid from cash payers. Of course, you could raise questions about the intelligence of the students, like who could support the Celtics when the Lakers are clearly the best? Now, from a psychological point of view, there are two main mechanisms that are so primal, we seem to put them above all rational course of action. The first one is cognitive availability. We make decisions not based on how much money we have, but on how much money it appears we have. See, the more money that is cognitively available to us, the easier it is to spend it. For example, if we want to get a coffee at Starbucks for $5, we're less likely to buy it if we only have $50 in cash. More likely if we have instead $500 on our debit card account and practically guaranteed to buy it with a $5,000 credit card limit. Unless, of course, we know anything at all about good coffee, in which case we won't buy it at all. But you get the idea. Another psychological trap the credit card gets us into is called delay discounting. Basically, this means that the reward that's closer to us in time is sweeter than one that's somewhere in the future. That's why, for example, you are now watching YouTube for a quick dopamine boost instead of finishing that work project, which will give you more satisfaction, but in a few days' time. Delayed discounting works with pain the same way. The closer it is, the more real and terrifying it becomes. Like, some people who've never been religious, but suddenly they start going to church when they're older because they kind of sense the devil's hot poker is moving closer and closer to the backside. That sort of thing. So the credit card pulls a marvelous trick. You get the reward of the purchase now, making it extra sweet, and you delay the pain of payment until much later, which makes you care very little about it. And just like that, we've collectively failed at basic reason. So how do we trick our brains into using credit cards wisely? Well, the same way that we learned as children that the electrical socket looks like it's made for your two fingers, but actually it's made for your little brother's two fingers. Just kidding, if your mother's around. But seriously, we just learn to use things the way they're meant to be used, instead of acting on first impulse. So here are 5 of the most common mistakes of credit card use and 5 ways of avoiding them. The first mistake comes with picking a credit card. We all have colorful offers with useful rewards flying at us from different directions, but you have to research them carefully and pick the card that suits your lifestyle. For example, a guy named Chris Hutchins has famously amassed over 10 million miles in credit card rewards and essentially travels the world for free. But would you need travel rewards in the first place if your only travel is seeing your grandmama twice a year and you normally go by bus? Choosing a card carefully also matters because it's not a good idea to apply for multiple credit cards at the same time. Authorities see this as credit hunting and it damages your overall credit score. The second mistake is being late on your payments. Of course, being late on your payments is clearly a bad idea, but even paying only 2 days before the deadline can backfire. If there's a technical problem with the transfer and your money gets there a minute late, it will still count as a full 30-day delay. Now, the penalty you might get for that can be a late fee, a bumped-up interest rate, a lower credit score, or death by firing squad. Okay, perhaps not. But have you actually read the small print? Have you really read it? The best life hack for this is to set up any sort of automatic payment schedule to your credit card account using an online payment system. The third mistake is using up too much of your available credit. Normally, it's advised not to go above 75%. So if your limit is $4,000, don't spend more than $3,000. Now, many people may think, oh, well, I should just raise my limit then. However, this whole raising your limit option is yet another trick banks use to make you spend more money. Don't fall for it. Just don't spend money you wouldn't be able to repay, regardless of your limit. In the end, common sense will always be the greatest life hack. The next mistake, and a big one, is taking out cash advances. Now, unless it's a life or death situation, like a real one, just don't. The interest rate on this is usually much higher than on standard purchases, and there's often no grace period. The interest starts being charged right away. So if you need cash, I don't know, ask your mom or search the bottom of a fountain, but just don't do it. And finally, well, this list is in no way final, honestly, but we've kind of reached the 75% of the budget limit for the production of this video, and we try to take our own advice and not go above that. So, after a couple of disappointments, you might want to just go and chuck your card right in the garbage and close your credit account, but don't do that. This can also negatively affect your credit rating. Just remember how dangerous your card can be and use it responsibly from the beginning. You know, like you would a gun. The Old West. Responsibility. So, to sum up, a credit card is a unique thing for which clear instructions exist, and yet millions of people still misuse it, acting on their animal instincts instead of using their human reason. It's like millions of people using their iPhones to hammer in nails because, well, they're hard and flat, aren't they? And probably, while the banks benefit from it, collectively we will continue to do exactly that. But individually, it's possible to not just use a credit card wisely, but do all sorts of incredible things with it, like that fellow Chris Hutchins does. Now, perhaps that's a bit of a paradox, but that's just how the system works. So grow up! And that's it from me for now. So hit the like button, subscribe, comment below, and goodbye.